Police and Basic Education Department officials have raided 3 schools at the notorious Inanda township in Durban. The operation is aimed at improving safety and ensuring compliance at public schools. Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube joining us now to talk about this and other issues in her department. Minister, good evening to you. Thank you very much for your time. You've completed a full year in office. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's start with the raid in schools, specifically with police in tow. This would seem a little too dramatic, with police officers doing body searches and what have you. Someone is going to say, is this necessary? How would you answer that?
Well, firstly, I would say you'll recall a couple of weeks ago we signed a memorandum of understanding, we renewed a memorandum of understanding that we had with the South African Police Service. And that really, the reason why we had to renew that MOU was because it was last updated in 2011. And I think you can ask anybody in South Africa right now that they'll tell you that the crime profile of violence that's happening in our schools has significantly changed since 2011. We are seeing teachers who are increasingly feeling unsafe in classrooms due to violence that is sometimes perpetuated by our own learners. We are also seeing educators and learners being at risk of being robbed outside schools. But we're also seeing violence, sexual violence, and cases of sexual violence that are happening against our learners. So at some point, Oli, it became important for me to not simply offer my thoughts, but also to say, what can we do with the SAPs to really strengthen our efforts to keep our schools safe? And yes, of course, somebody may say, is this not too heavy-handed? But the reality is that the protocol does allow us that we've signed with the SAPs, it allows for a couple of things. Number one, for visible policing during high traffic hours, which is at the beginning of school and at the end of school. But also it does allow where there has been reasonable suspicion that there are either dangerous weapons or drugs that are on the premises of schools, that the South African Police Service, but in tow with the Department of Education, are doing searches and seizures. Yeah. And so you would have seen this afternoon that such an operation was conducted. No dangerous weapons were found, but some narcotics, cigarettes, lighters, and the kind of thing were found on some learners. And now this is also becomes very important, because if learners are using drugs in schools, this also does affect their behavior. So I have a responsibility to not only just the other learners in those schools, but also to the teachers who we send to those schools to go and teach learners. And so this is part of our safety protocol that we've signed with the South African Police Service. And I'm glad to see that it didn't just end with the signing of an MOU, but we've done a lot of work as the department to, one, orientate and teach and really support provinces and districts in how this can be done in a way that is that's not invasive to schools, that also protects the rights of the learners, but also keeps everybody safe.
Just very quickly on this point, Minister, are you getting the desired effect, therefore, with these unannounced raids? And add to that, this whole notion of children bringing narcotics to school. During my time, I wouldn't even dream of taking dacha or even a cigarette to school. Whose responsibility is it, the whole notion of moral regeneration?
Look, am I satisfied? Firstly, I am quite pleased to see, as I said, that this is, because often government departments and ministers sign MOUs all the time, Ole, and it's so good to see that the SAPs and the Department of Education has really gone to communities to start to see this MOU come to life. So I'm pleased to see that it didn't end just in the corridors of Cape Town, but also it is in our communities. And we are onboarding SGBs, parents, and we're asking them to come on board in terms of really helping us with the scourge. And when you ask, whose responsibility is it to make sure that children are well behaved and that criminals are kept away from schools? And I would tell you that it's a multi-pronged approach. Number one, that as government, there's only so much we can do. My responsibility, as I say, is to make sure that educators who go to school are kept safe and that they are not, targeted and gunned down outside of schools, and that those children who are going to school to go and learn are also not subjected to people who may be on drugs, who are carrying dangerous weapons.
Yeah.
But at the same time, early parents have to come on board with us, because unless this message of saying you may not touch somebody without their consent, you may not carry narcotics in schools, you may not do these things, that is some of the teachings that need to happen at home. Has become deeply unfair to really misplace this responsibility onto educators, because their core responsibility is to teach and to keep others safe on the school premises.
Yeah.
So we have to employ other strategies to make sure that we are really stamping out the scourge of violence in our schools, because we can't keep hearing stories of people being harmed, killed, raped in schools. Schools are meant to be places of safety.
Another hot button issue is the KZN school nutrition program. How concerned are you about its handling? And in particular, the story that's not going away here is the selection of suppliers. What's the issue there, and how do you plan to solve it?
Look, I remain concerned about the matter that's happening in KZN regarding the school nutrition program, especially clearly because the school nutrition program is one of our largest budget line items in the budget of DBE. We spend about 10 billion rand a year, feeding over 9.6 million children every single day. So when a province is unable to deliver against that mandate, we're effectively not only really defying the rules of DORA, the Division of Revenue bill, which we have voted for in Parliament, which empowers provinces to use this conditional grant only for the purposes of school nutrition. I'm aware that KwaZulu-Natal has been battling financially as a department, and we have made some interventions with both the provincial treasury and the national treasury in that regard. However, it's going to be very important for the MEC, especially in the climate where there are schools who have maybe not received their school nutrition allocation or are battling with issues around scholar transport. It's going to be very important that this process be beyond reproach. It cannot be that such a large sum of money can perhaps be used for people who are politically connected and where food is not being delivered to our learners. And so this is something that I will be having a discussion with the MEC about, and he will essentially have to write to me formally to inform me what is he doing about the matter. As I say, I guard this jealously. You'll recall last year I came under considerable pressure when I called off a tender that sought to centralize the school nutrition program, because my fear was another NASFAS debacle where we were seeing this hyper centralization that meant that children were not getting their food. So we cannot have a situation like that that's happening in the provinces. And so that's a conversation that I'm going to have with the MEC and potentially the Premier too.
Well, you raise or you use a particular phrase, and it's one that is common: politically connected people, and this is a government tender. There are suggestions, and I'm using those words very strongly, suggestions that the MEC in this portfolio in KZN, Sipho Hlomuga, the very person you plan to have a conversation with, the allegation is that he is using this program to advance his political interests. Now, what kind of conversation might you want to have with Sipho Hlomuga? What specific answers are you looking for?
Look, for me, Xoli, I mean, the issue around the MEC's political interests and whatnot is not my realm of responsibility. Obviously, he has a direct reporting line to the Premier, and so the Premier would have to have this conversation with him. But my concern remains the integrity of the program. The question becomes, are the service providers appointed fairly, and are they delivering meals to schools? As a politician, for instance, I am not allowed in any way to have any direct influence on who does business with the DBE. I don't even know people personally who do business with the department. So there's an integrity issue here to say we have to protect the integrity of the program, number one. Number two, we also have to make sure that there's delivery. So for me, my concern is, how are you handling the allegations around politically connected individuals and companies, and how are you handling delivery to children? Any other issues around misconduct or any other allegations that he must answer, that will have to be dealt with by the Premier. But my concern remains KwaZulu-Natal and the learners there. Remember that KwaZulu-Natal has the largest number of learners in the country. And so anything that goes wrong there, that's a significant blow to the education system in its entirety. So my obsession is going to have to be about the integrity of the process, the integrity of the awarding of the contracts, and whether or not delivery is happening.
All right. Minister, it's appropriate, therefore, at this time to talk about your 1 year in office. You came in on the 3rd of July, as you so kindly reminded me before we went on air. Now, yours is to get the basics right in this particular portfolio. 80% of children in South Africa cannot read for meaning up to the grade 4 phase. You've said this yourself. What is it that you think needs to change, and what are you doing about it?
Polly, I think it's less about what I think needs to change. I think we need to be led here by evidence. And evidence suggests that if we neglect the formative years of any child's life, that the remedial actions that we do later on in a child's schooling career can either be ineffective or deeply and extremely expensive. And they have varying degrees of success. In South Africa, we have had, and I think historically, an obsession about, our children leaving school with a quality matric. But we can't actually guarantee that we can't guarantee whether or not children are leaving school with a quality matric unless we focus on the foundations of learning. And so, as you would remember, when I came into office, the first thing that I said what we needed to do is to have a strategic reorientation of the system, where we turn the system almost on its head and say, right, we have now inherited ECD into the Department of Basic Education. So children 0 to 4 have now become our responsibility. So how do we make sure that wherever they are in their ECD centers, do they have a curriculum? Do they have a qualified practitioner that is teaching them? Do they have toys, LTSM, learning and teaching material? Do they have quality meals every single day? Because what we do in those first 4 years influences whether children are ready by 5, by 6 to get to grade 1. By the time they get to grade 1, it's not the first time they're interacting with a book or numbers or puzzles. It would have been a continuation of what would have begun before. And in South Africa, Xoli, the thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that there are 2 types of 10-year-olds in this country. A 10-year-old that is a child that was read to earlier on in life and was able to play with puzzles and toys. By the time they get to grade 1, reading has become a big part of their culture. But there's also a second 10-year-old who interacts with the book for the very first time when they get to grade 1. Both of those 10-year-olds take the same international benchmarking test when they get to grade 4. And the one child does not meet the requirements of that test, and they fail to be able to read for meaning. So my responsibility is to say, what have we not gotten right with that first 10-year-old? And it's clear, international and domestic research tells us all the time that the focus on the formative years of a child's life takes care of all these things that we obsess about, the maths and science statistics, whether children are taking on difficult subjects. All of those things will be resolved if we make sure that children can read, can calculate with confidence by the time they leave the foundation phase. So that's my obsession, to say I want South Africans to be obsessed about matric results as much as they're obsessed about the test that children take in grade R that determines whether they're ready for grade 1. Because once we do that, it means that we are looking at an education system in its entirety.
Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwarube, thank you very much for your time, and best of luck for the next couple of years that you are in office. Hopefully we'll speak again once you have completed this term of office. Looking forward to those important turnarounds.